Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you the Paranormal podcast sensation that is sweeping the nation, hosted by Andrew and John. This is Sasquatchers!
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Sasquatchers. The intro said it all. I'm Andrew. He's John. And tonight we have a guest with us who saved episode 10. We wouldn't have had an episode this week, but he had reached out and he has a lot of interesting stories and an interesting background that we're going to get into with him. So without further ado, because he can tell you better than I'm going to introduce you to Gary Fisher. Gary, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, guys. Thanks for the opportunity, and glad I could help you guys out and allow you to have an episode this week.
Yeah, we super appreciate it. So, Gary, tell us, you told me that you were an investigator of the paranormal, and you had a couple of interesting, I was going to say experiences, but excursions. You had mentioned that you had done some investigating in Korea and in Kuwait. So I was just wondering if, you could give us the background, how you got into that and eventually how you found yourself overseas.
Okay. So my kind of journey with, all things paranormal kind of started when I was 11 years old. My mom, single mom, so it was just her and I in the house. And I'd gotten up one night to use the restroom, and there was a factory behind our house. So there were a lot of lights for that alleyway that lit up our kitchen at night. And in our living room, we had one of those giant console TVs that take like 4 people to move because they're like 500 pounds. And it would sit in the corner of our living room. So as you go to the bathroom at night, you could see into the kitchen through the reflection of the lights coming in, right? It lit up the kitchen. You could see the kitchen. I start to go into the restroom, and I see a shadow of someone walking around in my kitchen. I'm 11, right? So I'm like, okay, my mom's famous for getting up, getting snacks. Mom's getting, ice cream or something. So I head into the bathroom to use the bathroom. Her bedroom was off that bathroom, and I hear her snoring. So at 11, my first thought isn't, holy crap, there's a ghost in my house. It's, holy crap, someone's in my house, right? And, being the dumb 11-year-old that I am, I don't go wake my mom up. I don't call 911. I go get my baseball bat, and I'm going to take care of things. So I fly around the corner. There's nobody there. All the doors and windows are locked. I go out front, walked up and down the street. At this point, it's like 1:30 in the morning. There's nobody there. I even hopped the fence into that alleyway. There's nobody there. Came back, locked everything up, went to bed. Next morning, I told my mom what happened, and she smiled and she said, hey, I believe you, right? Like, you saw something. Something was here, because you weren't asleep. But this is the 1980s. Let's not tell too many people that so they don't think you're batshit crazy. So I agreed, right? Okay, cool. A few weeks later, there was a lady down the street that had lived in the neighborhood for like 40 years. She'd been there like almost longer than the neighborhood. And she was down visiting my mom. And I guess my mom could tell I really wanted to tell somebody what I saw. And I guess she kind of felt like maybe that lady was the least judgmental of the people I could tell. And she goes, tell her what you saw. So I did. I recounted everything that had happened. And she smiled and she looks at my mom and she goes, he's not crazy. He saw what he saw. And she goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, he's not the first person that's seen that shadow in this kitchen. We were renting at the time. Going back 3 sets of renters, at least one person in each one of those families had seen that shadow in the kitchen. And come to find out, going back 4 renters, was an elderly husband and wife that had lived in the house. Husband, like my mom, was famous for getting up, getting snacks in the middle of the night. He gets up to make a sandwich one night and has a massive heart attack and a stroke and dies in the kitchen. And ever since then, at least one person has seen that shadow in the kitchen. And of course, she goes about her business and she goes on her way. And my mom looks at me and goes, I knew you saw what you saw. But again, I'll reiterate, it's the 1980s. Let's not tell too many people because they're going to think you're crazy. So I didn't, but I had an interest, right? Like I'd seen like In Search Of and all that stuff. And this one really piqued my interest. So I go to my school library, and of course they got one book on the paranormal, and it's got the Patterson-Gimlin picture, and the picture it's now been debunked of the Loch Ness monster, and a little bit on ghosts, but that was it, right? So I kind of read it and I was into it, but then time happens. You go to middle school, you go to high school, you kind of forget about it. I joined the military in 2002 and got transferred around. Well, actually, I joined to see the world out of Phoenix, Arizona, and got stationed right back in Phoenix, Arizona for the first 7 years of my career. Mom was ecstatic. I was not, but it is what it is. But I did finally get orders. I changed jobs and I got orders to Columbus, Mississippi. And growing up, I had played soccer as a hobby for most of my life, like 30 years. And I got hurt. And the doctor said, hey there, champ, your pro career's over. You can't play anymore. So I suggest you find another hobby. So we're in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi, right? I didn't really hunt. I didn't really fish. I fished a little bit, but didn't really hunt. And that's pretty much all you do there. And so I'm sitting there thinking, what can I do for a hobby? And I remember I'd been watching Ghost Hunters for 3 or 4 years at that point, maybe even closer to 5. I think it came on in 2004. And I always kind of felt like, these guys seem like they're helping people, right? And I always kind of felt like I had a calling for that. That's why I was in the military. And I said, you know what, maybe I could do this. So I called several local groups. First one never called me back. Second one said, no, we're not looking for new members. Third one says, hey, by chance, we happen to be in the middle of a real huge roster turnover, which I've come to find out, and I've been doing it since, happens a lot, right? Whether you're in a group or running a group, it's every once in a while, massive exodus and massive new people. They said, hey, why don't you come out and see if we like you, see if you like us on an investigation. And if it works and clicks for both of us, we'll bring you on board. I said, okay. So, I've seen ghost hunters. They're doing, 3-4 bedroom houses. We're going to get to help somebody. First investigation they take me on is a 6-story abandoned hospital in Vicksburg, Mississippi that was haunted as shit. And I was hooked. And thankfully at the end of the night, I said, so how'd I do? And they're like, excellent. We want you on board. And so they brought me in. They trained me. I learned how to do everything from tech to case management, interviews, historical research, and then the investigative part of it. And I was just hooked. So I was there with that group for a couple years. During that time, I got temporary orders to Kuwait, which you talked about earlier, which I'd had an experience while I was in Kuwait. There was a building that we worked in, and then there was the chow hall, and in between the two was this old airplane hangar. And you'd walk by it, and you just get this weird energy coming off it, right? Like you just got this feeling like, wow, there's like something about this building. And so a couple of days I'd stop, and I just kind of looked at it, and I noticed it's all sealed up. The doors are sealed, the windows are sealed. Anything that's got in or out of this place is sealed. And it's the only hangar like that. And I'm like, well, that's weird, right? On top of the weird vibes it's thrown off. So I found one of the Kuwaiti Air Force members, and I asked him, I say, what's the deal with that lost my word. What's the deal with that building there? And he said, the reason that's all sealed up is that's where Saddam hung all the Kuwaiti generals in the first Gulf War. He said, in fact, the nooses are still hanging in there. And by Islamic law, only Islamic clerics are allowed to go in there, and they won't go anywhere near that building, so that we seal it up and keep people out. And I said, so you're saying there's like paranormal stuff going on there? And he's like, yeah, a lot. I'm like, okay, well, that would at least explain the feeling. So I get home that night. I email my wife back in the States, and I'm like, send me my K2 meter. Send me my recorder, right? Now, mind you, I've been told, stay away from this building, American. You're not allowed in there, right? So I kind of had to be sly about it each day, going back and forth to chow hall, hit it with a K2, turn the recorder on and walk real slow. Didn't find anything on the recorder, but every time I went by that building, the K2 meter would just spike. And I asked the guy, I said, hey, is there any electricity in that building? And he goes, no, we've killed that long ago. Like the lines are docked. There's nothing going in or out of that building. I'm like, okay. So that was really cool, right? But you can tell how different parts of the world take the paranormal and how they revere it. And it's totally different than we do it in the States, right? It's for a lot of people, this is a hobby. For a lot of people, this is fun. It's very different over there, right? They're very serious about it. They're very guarded about it. So I found that interesting. flash forward, I come back to the States. The very next year, I get orders to South Korea. And at that point, I'd already investigated on the Air Force installation that I worked on in Mississippi a couple times. And so I was bouncing around with my boss, and I mentioned to him, hey, this is what I do for a hobby. And he's like, I've always kind of been interested in that. Maybe we can get some guys together and find some place to investigate while we're here, since, we're all separated from our families. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So we found a couple other guys that were kind of into it. And now we're like, now where do we investigate, right? Because you're in Korea. You can't just go off base and say, hey, I'd like to investigate your place, right? There's a language barrier. Again, there's a different reverence for the paranormal. But we did find out from one of the guys that ended up being in our group that we formed, there was a building there that the girls that worked in the admin portion of the military would never stay late at night at, because they heard bangs and they heard voices and doors slamming, and they just stayed out of that. Like 5 o'clock, they're out. And so we went through the official channels. We got permission. We ended up getting to investigate that building. Found some pretty interesting stuff. We picked up some stuff on our voice recorders. We got some stuff on some still photographs. I learned a valuable lesson as a paranormal investigator, because the base newspaper sent an investigator out to investigate with us, because it was right around Halloween, and they wanted to do a piece for public relations. And so she came out, and she gave me a GoPro camera to put on top of my head, and like, oh, this is great. So she can see it from my perspective. About 2 hours into it, I have to pee. So I go into the men's room, not even thinking. I look down and taking care of business, get done, and went, oh shit. I just filmed myself going to the bathroom. So we go back out, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And she goes, well, I got to go. So if I could get that GoPro camera back. I'm like, yep, in just 1 minute. And I took it and went in my office and erased it and gave it back to her. I'm like, sorry, you're not getting anything tonight.
Oh,
So you young investigators out there, lesson learned, don't do that. Anyway, so we did find some cool evidence. And then I got stationed in Tampa, Florida from there. And at that point, my wife at the time had started getting ill, and she was chronically ill. So I didn't have the energy in me to kind of start a new group over, because I don't know about where your guys' backgrounds are, but starting a group takes a lot of work, right? Like you got to interview, and you got to, sometimes you're supplying all of the equipment, and you're dragging all the, tracking down all the cases. It's a lot of work, and I just didn't have the time or the energy to do it. So I joined a group down there. Again, we got to investigate the Air Force Base that I worked down there. There was several reports from a couple different buildings that we did. It was total 3 or 4 investigations on that installation. And then a few years into it, the group's owner, the founder, and a few of us that were a part of the group kind of had a difference of opinion on where the group was going to go, right? He wanted it to go one path, more power to him. I'm not saying anything disparaging. We wanted to go more of the helping people route. So we went ahead and formed our own group from the remnants of that group, although they still stayed, a group themselves. And so, did a bunch of cases there. And then for the last 4 years of my career, I got stationed in Southern Illinois, right outside of St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm at right now. And I formed a brother group to that. So that's kind of my investigative Cliff Notes, and it's probably way longer than a Cliff Note, so I apologize.
no, that's okay. You gave us a good bit of stuff to work with. I'm just terrible at stopping guests talking, even when I have a thought pop up. I'm
Okay.
just, I guess, I don't know, as a host or interviewer, it almost comes second nature to
Sure.
my desire to hear your story and learn, which, kind of drives that's the reason why I do this,
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily investigate anything yet. I haven't taken any steps to that. So my experiences are from hearing individuals like yourself, recount stuff. So I'm going to try to go back a little bit.
All right.
I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. And
Okay.
When you had mentioned that you had seen that figure in that building that you guys were renting, Was that the only time you ever had any type of experience with that, or did that kind of become something that was more of a regular thing for you in that kitchen?
Yeah, so I would see the guy. I'm assuming it was him. Many more times while we lived there. Again, middle of the night, right, and not during the day. But I would make it a point then going forward. Anytime I got up to use the restroom, or if I was going to the kitchen to get a snack, I would make sure I looked in the TV. And more often than not, you would see shadow moving around in there. And of course, by the time you get around the corner and turn the light on, there's nothing there. But no, we did. I saw him. My mom never saw him. She said she did get up a couple times and never saw him. And I don't know what the reason for that is. You know, when it comes to the paranormal, there's so many theories out there. Some theories say, oh, well, they identify with people's energy, so they'll make themselves known to certain folks and not other folks. But I don't know. But I did see that shadow figure many more times before I moved out of there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Especially because it presents as a shadow figure, and a lot of times those tend to be completely different than like a leftover spirit, so to speak. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing too.
Yeah,
You never felt any of like the shadow people vibes from it? It just always felt kind of
no.
safe there. Or...
Yeah, I mean, never ever felt like, oh, this is ominous or any of the other stuff that Hollywood kind of tend to want to make you believe about certain aspects of the paranormal, right? Like, hey, no disrespect to that one really famous guy, but not everything's a demon, and not everybody gets possessed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can count 2 times where I went into a location to do an investigation where the energy just fell off, and I said, you know what, I don't have the skill set to help you. Let me network and get somebody in here that can help you. And I ended up referring them to paranormal clergy both times. But that's out of hundreds of cases over 15 years, right? So I never felt negative. I never felt any of the like again the Hollywood sensationalism of what a shadow person is. Like any other aspect of the paranormal, there's theories on what they are, but we don't really know, and that's part of what drives me to do this. The first and foremost is to help people and make people feel safe and secure in their homes and businesses, but I do want to know what this stuff is and how it works, and that's one of the driving factors of why I keep doing it.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, and that is a good point. That there are so many people who actually have had strangely positive experiences with shadow people,
Mm-hmm.
and the theories are just you know it astronomical and different, and without any type of further solid evidence. I guess it's all up to speculation.
Well, everybody tends to think that there are experts in this field. How can you be an expert in something that we can't really prove yet? You can be experienced, and there are experienced people out there that know a lot of stuff and know their stuff. But I would not consider anyone an expert in the paranormal because we don't know what the paranormal is.
That's why it's called paranormal, right?
Yeah.
If we knew what it was, it would be normal.
Yeah. So I would say there's like the 3 tenets of the paranormal. You got your ghosts, you got your cryptids, you got your UFOs, right? I know ghosts exist because I've experienced it. I have my feelings on what I think they are. But again, I can't prove it to someone that's never had an experience, right? They go, oh, it's bullshit. It's never happened. Well, if I hadn't had that so young, I probably would say the same thing, right? Until you've experienced it, you may think it's possible, but do you really know? I've never run into Bigfoot. I think he's possible. I think he may have existed at one point on this planet, but until I can actually get concrete interaction, I got to go with I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's fair that you do it too.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that you were young when you saw this shadow figure, and even being young, you were not in fear, or you didn't feel threatened at that point in time, because kids, I mean, if I as a child walk out in my kitchen and there's a shadow figure when I know there's nobody else here in my home, there are a couple things that come to mind. Somebody's broken into the house, somebody's here that shouldn't be. What is this moving around in there? So that's interesting that whatever vibe or whatever you want to call it that it was giving off, was enough that to calm. Or maybe it was just your personality as a child too. That's possible as well.
I was more fearful of it being an actual person in my house. And then kind of
Sure.
when we came to the conclusion the following morning that it wasn't a person in the house, I'm like, okay, right? Again, no ominous vibes. It was just something rolling around in my kitchen. So,
Just
they
some
always say,
entity.
yeah. Well, I mean, they always say like kids and pets can see the paranormal and can see ghosts and stuff.
Yeah.
Why? Because they haven't been told that they don't exist or that they're not real. So when
that's a
they
good
see
point.
something, they just assume it's real.
Yeah. Um, I'd never thought of it like that before. I know that
No,
like
I mean, that's a good point.
it registers with children and obviously I've seen dogs and stuff also kind of start to pick up on things with their heightened senses or whatever. But I'd never put that together. That's an interesting take. I'm glad you threw that out there. I'm going to ponder that a little bit. But um, do you think that this was more of a strict haunting, or do you think with your knowledge and expertise that would you label it a residual haunting, so to speak?
I think it was a residual one simply because it was at the same time of night that guy would get up and get sandwiches and stuff and never really saw later in the morning before dawn or earlier in the evening, or during the day at all. So I would label it as a residual. That's obviously something that this guy really liked to do. And from my perspective on a residual, that's kind of what a residual is, right? It's something you do meticulously every day at the same time or every other day or every week. And this is just something you're tied to and it's something you may have enjoyed. And so that energy kind of, the stone tape theory gets absorbed into the environment and then just gets played back like a giant tape deck. Now, how that works, again, part of the reason I do what I do, I'd like to find out. But that theory makes sense to me because it is the same thing. Middle of the night, shadow in the kitchen, never see it any other time. I'd say that's residual.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I hope he at least gets to enjoy the sandwich that he's constantly in flux making.
Yeah, I hope it's like got like gabagool and stuff on it.
Yeah, it's got to, man. It's got to.
Just a big Italian stack sandwich.
Yes.
But it almost makes me wonder, and this might be outside even like some of the mainstream paranormal ideas, is that even though that this residual haunting or occurrence is happening, is there a spirit even tied to it? It could just be, maybe it's just leftover energy.
Yeah,
like he's gone, he's passed, he's moved on.
Right.
But there's still, since it was such a ritualistic event and there was so much emotion for him tied to it, like that was his favorite thing, was making that sandwich at night.
It's almost
maybe
like a
that's
footprint, right? Like the boot's
right,
not there, the person's not there, but they were there.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's maybe like I said, maybe that's maybe that's paranormal for that idea. I don't know, but it makes sense, like you said, like the footprint analogy. Like just every night there's the footprint.
Yeah, and I've seen lots of residuals in the 15 years I've been doing this, right? And again, why do we know how? There's the stone tape theory. I spent 7 years as a mechanic in the Air Force and 13 plus now that I'm retired and doing the same thing as an analyst. So I kind of bring those debunking skills into it. Well, I can't prove the stone tape theory, but it makes a lot of sense to me as to why, especially when it comes to residuals, they are the way they are.
Do you think that you see more residuals than what you would classify non-residuals when you're out investigating?
Not so much in my experience. A lot of what I deal with and my groups have dealt with, obviously are people in their homes, and it tends to be either people that we, again, sometimes we can't, we can tell them, yeah, we think there's a spirit here, but I don't know who it is, right? They're just not willing to communicate who they are, and we haven't been able to figure out from our investigative work who they are. But a lot of times it's people that have lived in that location before, or family members. It's every call I field, the first thing they say is, "You're going to think I'm crazy." Well, I don't think you're crazy. You're experiencing what you're experiencing. My job as an investigator is to tell you whether I think it's something normal and maybe treatable, a la, bad wiring or whatever the case may be. Or there's something paranormal there, and we'll see if we can help with that. But you'll get people like, oh, there's this, this, again, demon in my house. And you do the investigation and we go, hey, we kind of feel like it's your Uncle Frank and he's just watching over you and the kids. And then she'll go, oh, it's Uncle Frank? That's cool. Tell him he can stay, but don't wake up the kids. and a lot of times it ends up that way. And that's the ending we want. We want people to feel, hey, sometimes there's stuff in your house and you may want it gone and we may not be able to get it gone, or once we tell you who we think it is, you may not want it gone. And that's kind of the best ending for any of our cases.
Yeah. I still feel like I want Uncle Frank gone. Sorry. Uncle Frank.
We have people say that, hey, Uncle Frank's an asshole. Get him out of here. Right?
Pack it up. You're out of here.
Yeah. You're done. You're done. But yeah.
You broached a subject there that I've been wanting. I've been dying to have somebody on that I can ask this question to. So when you're discerning whether or not you're dealing with a true haunting versus bad wiring or plumbing or something like that, how often do you run into that situation where that it is something like that? And it's something that, you mentioned the early seasons of the Ghost Hunters, and I still watch that show religiously. I mean, I love them to death, but it's definitely, for better or worse, it's produced.
Sure.
That's a television show.
I can take tidbits from it, right?
Yeah.
And incorporate it into my investigative style. And one of the things I took into my investigative style is going in to disprove a haunting, right? Yeah. And just because I tell you that there's something man-made or natural that's happening doesn't necessarily mean that's what's causing it, or it may just be contributing to it. But until you get the normal figured out and addressed by a professional, then how are you ever really going to know if there's something paranormal there? Right. And so I'll point that out, right? Hey, I think you got bad wiring. You got what is essentially a fear cage here. You live under these high voltage power lines. Does this stuff happen when you're not at home? That type of stuff. And when you point it out, a lot of times people go, okay, I'll get that checked out. And then once they do, you get a call back. Hey, we don't have any more problems. And some people just don't address it. And they just keep calling you back. Well, we need you to come out here. Again, I can't help you until I can rule out this stuff. So, yeah, it's a balance. You gotta, it's one of these.
That was one of my favorite aspects of that show early on. And you can still watch the old episodes on different streaming platforms and stuff. And, it's something that over time they lost for one reason or another, that the shows kind of stopped showing that part. But I love.
Well, they had a split. They had a split too, didn't they?
Yeah. So I think
not really.
The longer they were on, the more it's about ratings, right? The TV executives give two shits whether there's a resolution. They want sensational ratings, right? And I have a friend of mine, because I used to get pissed when I would watch the early seasons of some of these shows and go, that is not how we do it. That is not how we do it, right? Like they're glossing over all this stuff. They're making it seem like you review your evidence in 5 minutes when you're sitting on your ass for 8 hours after you've already been experienced it for 8 hours trying to figure this out. And I had a buddy of mine who's a cop, and he said, I used to do the same thing about the cop shows. He said, I would get so angry because of how Hollywood just jazzes it up. He said, and then one day I realized these are just for entertainment. And if I can sit back and watch it from that perspective, I'm okay. And so that's how I kind of took it from that point forward. So now I can sit and watch it and enjoy it, and I'll laugh and I'll tell my mom that is totally not what we do. And, I truly believe that a lot of this stuff is faked anymore, because sometimes you don't get any evidence, right? I've been to places 3-4 times, 8 hours a pop, and not gotten a damn thing. But every time I go home, those people are calling me saying they got stuff going on. So, for that certain one that has the daemon of the week, so to speak, like that, statistically, it's an improbability. So I get it. They need ratings. Sometimes they gotta, I guess, pump up the volume, so to speak.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I guess John kind of talked about the split or whatever, and you talked a lot about how different groups kind of go their separate ways, and with the exoduses and stuff. It seems like that's kind of really, really prevalent in paranormal investigating, and I'd be curious to see what you think is the reasoning behind that.
Well, so I think a lot of it in the early years, and I say early years for me from 2009 on, was the prevalence of the programs and how popular they were in those early 2000s, beginning in 2000 teens. And so every Tom, Dick, and Harry that watched it went, oh, that looks like fun. That looks cool. That looks exciting. That's a thrill ride. That's better than riding a roller coaster. I want to do that. And so they come out and they're excited in the beginning, and then they see the actual work that goes into it. Not only the prep, not only the investigation, but the after investigation, where you have to go through all the evidence. And you got to, if you're running 4 cameras, cool, we got the whole house covered in 4 cameras for 8 hours. Except that's 32 hours of shit you got to sit and watch again, over and over and over. I'll tell you a quick story of my group in Florida. We went to this house. Our tech guy goes, I got a brand new DVR. And this was back when we were hardwiring the cables, right before we had the wireless cameras. And so 8 cameras set up in this house. And he's like, who's going to watch the cameras tonight? And I'm like, I'll take the bullet. I'll sit and watch them live, right? And so we're sitting there, and I'd call stuff out. We were checking it, and we get done. And I messaged him a couple days later, and I said, did you get a chance to review the evidence? And he goes, yeah, about that. I bought a hard drive that didn't have anything on the inside. So those cameras were just running and not recording for 8 hours. And I'm like, dude, we caught stuff on that. And he's like, did we? Because I don't have a record of it.
How did he? How did the tech guy?
Yes,
buy
exactly.
He bought a hard drive.
Why are
case.
you our tech guy? You're killing. You bought an empty case with no
empty
hard
case,
drive,
which was $8 compared to a hard drive, which at the time would have been probably like 100 something.
We used to joke that he bought his gear from North Korea. So, but yeah, so silly stuff like that. But yeah. I think when it comes to the TV shows, you got to remember they're there to get ratings. They're not there to actually show evidence or help people. I think there's people involved in those shows that have those altruistic, feelings, and they do want to help people and do the best they can. But I also have several friends that are in the paranormal TV world that once you sign that rider, they own you, right? Until 3-4 years past the show date, you can't say anything disparaging about them. You can't tell them what really went on if something was different. It's just how all those contracts are written. So they're in a tough spot.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot that there's NDAs exist everywhere. I'm a chef when I'm not doing this, and I ran a multi-concept restaurant, but it wasn't mine. So I'm actually not allowed to use any of the recipes that I had invented or any of the dishes that I invented when I was running that kitchen for them.
How do you copyright a recipe?
I signed paperwork that said that.
I mean, could you use like white pepper instead of black pepper and call it something else?
It's not the same thing anymore.
I've not even legally, because I signed an NDA, allowed to tell you what I put in it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, I understand that. So back in September, I had an opportunity to do an episode of a TV show that's going to be coming out, I think, sometime next year. I can't say a lot about it, again, because of the NDA. But what I did find interesting about the NDA, and this is not a dig at those guys, because the people I worked with on the show were amazing, but I can't say anything disparaging about them for 5 years after it airs, even if I don't like how it's edited or how I'm presented. And I don't anticipate there being it. I was telling the story of my deceased wife, and they were very caring and kid gloved and very supportive of how I told my story, and they pretty much let me tell it. So I don't anticipate there being a problem. But all of the writers in the NDA were just amazing. I'm like, now I finally understand my friends that do these TV shows week in and week out, and why they're like, yeah, don't do this. This is not really worth it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, when you're working really hard, and obviously there's that goal and there is that huge market, but once you make it, it's not always something. It's not what it's cracked up to be. And
every single one of them have a separate job, right? Other than, you're probably talking the Ghost Hunters and the Ghost Adventures guys. Other than those two, I'm willing to bet there's actually no quote unquote money in paranormal TV for the cast. So, there's a little bit, but they still got to work other jobs. So
Or
it's not
probably Mountain Monsters guys too. They've gotten very popular over the last
yeah, I think a lot of those shows though are making more on the convention circuit and the autograph circuit and
that might be true because they do go
and
around
the
a
boat
lot.
shows. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where they play it off to people when they try to get them on these shows of, hey, we can't really pay you a lot. And I do know if you get a second contract, if you get renewed, every time you get renewed, the cast gets a little more creative power or a little bit more money or whatever that balance is. But in the beginning, man, they don't, it doesn't pay much and they own the way you're presented.
And it's another thing. This is something that it's really a labor of love for just about everybody involved, at least in that level. And so it's something that you could easily be taken advantage of in that regard.
I guess as long as you know going in that that's how it is and you sign your name on the dotted line, well, then you got to live with the results, right? Again, I feel like the program I was on treated my story very respectfully and caring, and I don't anticipate there being an issue. I think the way I told it is how it's going to be presented. But I can't necessarily say that for all programs because, there's everybody's different.
Right. Yeah. But so you were talking about, when you were investigating in Kuwait and you were trying to do it on the sly. You mentioned, I think it was a KF meter.
A K2 meter, yeah.
K2 meter. So for anyone who's listening who might not know what that is, I was wondering if you could maybe give us a rundown of it.
Sure. K2 meter. Is that my dog? Whose dog
That's
is that?
mine.
Okay.
They're outside all the way over on the fenced in area too.
So. Oh, wow.
Every one of us have dogs. It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
I have 3.
I have 2. One's a big one and one's a little terrier. And that sounded like my terrier. I'm like, what is she doing?
No, those are just little beagles.
Our dogs are side characters to this.
Gotcha. Anyway, so K2 meter is actually a piece of equipment that they've pulled in from other disciplines, right? It's been used by electricians and stuff to show differences in electromagnetic fields. Now, TV shows, or a lot of TV shows, I'll say, present that as proof of a spirit. No, it's not. It's a proof of there's a change in the electromagnetic field. Now, your job as an investigator is to figure out why that is. Is that something not, normally occurring, or could it be because of paranormal activity? But TV will say, "Oh, look, the K2's going. There's a ghost here." That's step 12. You haven't even done 1 through 11 yet to try and determine that. When it comes to equipment, I've found the most success with stuff again that was used for other disciplines. Thermal cameras, right? They're not paranormal exclusive. They were used for other things. Plumbers use them to find leaks in the walls or, gaps in air around windows and whatnot. So it's beneficial, and I know it works and I know how it works. I got to be honest, like stuff like the Xbox camera, I'm just not a fan of. I don't know the inner workings of that to tell me that someone hasn't put something in there that would cause stuff to be there that isn't there. So I try to take a grounded approach when it comes to equipment stuff. But the Kinect. Thank you. Yeah,
I remember when that was
Xbox camera. I don't know.
I know when that got. I remember when that got popular on some of these paranormal shows where they were using the Kinect because it would draw out like the movements and that. And I kind of thought it was silly a little bit myself, but.
So I had a friend that's way smarter in electronics than I am explain to me that he doesn't think that they're legit either because those cameras are designed to look for motion. So it's kind of like your brain when you're looking into a cloud and the whole pareidolia thing, your brain's trying to force fit it to make it look like something. He said that's kind of the same principle on those cameras. They're looking for anything. So if it sees a chair, it might put a body in that chair simply because it sees the chair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And again, he's a lot smarter when it comes to that stuff than I am. So I that's one piece I'm not a big fan of anymore. Let's be honest. There haven't been a lot of advances in paranormal equipment in at least like 20 years. And all they do is they put 3 or 4 pieces together in a different box with different color lights and different chimes. And that's it. And again, that's not to disparage the companies that make that stuff. And a lot of people buy them. But at the end of the day, what have we done to kind of progress this? Again, part of what I want to do is prove this. I can't prove it with the equipment we have today. So I'm hoping there's some young folks coming in that got some unique ideas and maybe some different tactics and different sets, pieces of equipment they can create or co-op from another discipline to maybe further the research.
So speaking of equipment, so what's your opinion on like the talk box?
The spirit box? I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
So I have a quick story about the spirit box involving my wife that passed away, if you guys have time.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Absolutely. So in the beginning, I didn't necessarily believe in them, but we used them. And the more I used them, the more we started to have success. Like I mentioned, I think earlier, when I was in Korea, my wife got sick in 2012. They flew me back early. And then from about 2012 to 2019, she was just chronically ill. And then in 2019, she unfortunately passed away. Love of my life, my soulmate, my best friend, my rock, real kick in the nuts.
Yeah, sorry to hear about that.
Thank you. She's come back a few times. And about 6 months after she passed, my group and I were doing a local business here. Doing an investigation for them because they had some paranormal experiences. And that was about the time the Estes method was getting really popular. Are you guys familiar with that?
I am not.
I've heard of it.
Okay, so you take a spirit box, right? The squawk box that runs through the radio frequencies, and you put headphones, sound canceling headphones on a person and a blindfold. And so they can't hear anything else in the environment other than what's coming through that radio. And so I did that. And it was a restaurant we were in. So I'm at one end of the restaurant I was doing it. So I had the headphones on and the blindfold my partner, and the rest of the folks were at the other end of the restaurant, and they were speaking very softly and they were asking questions. And so the theory is they come through and I don't know what the questions are. I'm just repeating everything I hear. Right. And sometimes it doesn't correlate at all. And sometimes it does. We've had some really good success. So anyway, before I finish that story, back up so it makes more sense. When I first got involved in the paranormal, my wife wanted nothing to do with it. I'd come home from an investigation. She'd say, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I go, "Oh, I'm excited." I don't want to know. I just want to make sure you had a good time and never bring something home, right? Never bring something home. Got it. So we joked one day. I said, if I ever go before you do, I said, all my friends in the paranormal who have equipment, and the very few people I know that I feel are really actually gifted psychics and have actual abilities. I said, if I'm able to come back to any of them, either through their equipment or through their abilities, I'm going to tell you that the code word is blueberry pancakes. There's no way equipment or a psychic would know that, right? To pull that out of their hat, unless it was me that they're actually communicating with. And we laughed about it. And she goes, okay, the code word's blueberry pancakes. Anyway, back to the restaurant. So we're sitting there and we're having a conversation with the spirits that were there, according to the people that I talked to later that were asking the questions. And I'm right in the middle of it. And through the headset, my wife's voice comes on and says blueberry pancakes. And I remember I took these off. I slammed them down. I pulled the blindfold off. I'm crying, took off, walked outside. My partner who helped me co-found the team comes running out after me. And he's the only other one besides my wife and I that knew that story about blue. He said, what the hell happened in there? I said, I heard Dana say blueberry pancakes. And being a friend that he was, he's like, oh man, are you sure? Like, because that thing's going fast. I said it went across like 4 or 5 stations. Blueberry pancakes. It was her voice. So like, she's there. And so he kind of brought me back in. And at that point, because I had thrown the headset off, it unplugged it from the spirit box. And now you can hear through the speaker, right? And I think to his credit, he was trying to kind of make me feel better. And he goes, I don't think Dana's here tonight, right? We were talking to some other spirits. He said, if she was here, like she'd come on that thing and say my name. 3 seconds later in her voice, she says, hi, Brian.
Oh, wow.
And he starts crying. I start crying. Everybody there starts crying. So yes, I believe in spirit boxes. Do I think they hit 100% of the time like Hollywood makes you think? No, absolutely not. There's a lot of times you just don't. It depends on the spirit and their energy. And again, I don't know why this is. Another thing I'm trying to prove or figure out is some spirits seem to be inclined to use certain pieces of equipment. Some don't. She came through on a spirit box. A couple other times she's come through using the flashlight method. She won't touch my REM pod. She won't set my REM pod off at all. even though when I know she's there, right? So I don't know if it's preference or energy or what, but that's one of those things I certainly would like to know at some point.
I think energy has a lot to do with it. And that's just kind of based on my limited knowledge and experience. I think like it almost seems like a spirit box is easier to kind of harness and attach to versus maybe something that would take a lot more of your energy to accomplish.
Sure.
I mean, at least from, again, I've never even touched one, but
Yeah.
just from my limited knowledge, that's kind of the takeaway that I always had with it.
It's kind of what I'm leaning with until I can find something that proves or disproves that. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. It's just how their energy or how much energy they have or how they're able to disperse that energy to let us know they're there. It just may be certain pieces of equipment work for certain individuals.
That's an incredible story, man.
Yeah.
It's I guess you were jarred by that, but I'm sure that was like, in retrospect, something that was cathartic for you.
Oh God, yeah. And so she's come back a few times. She passed on a Saturday, and of course all the family's there. But then Sunday everybody goes home, right? They all got to go back to work on Monday. So it was myself and my youngest daughter, who was I think 22 at the time, and my dog. That was all that was in the house on Sunday. And I'm doing laundry, right? Just to not think about it for a minute, because that'd been 24 hours of, hey, my wife passed away. And so I'm folding clothes in the bedroom, and she's out in the living room playing with the dog. And I hear my wife's voice distinctly, not in my head, audibly say, Caitlin, which is our oldest daughter, who wasn't at the house at that point. She'd already gone back home. And she used to say that when Caitlin would annoy her, like she pretended she was mad at her, and she'd just go, Caitlin, like, knock it off. And I went, no, because like I purposely wasn't trying to think about my wife, right? Like I'm engrossed in, I got football on and I'm engrossed in laundry just to not think about it. And so I'm like, So I walked out in the living room. My daughter's on the floor playing with the dog. I said, hey, did you just say something? And she goes, no. I said, did you hear somebody say something? And she looks at me and goes, no. I said, you didn't hear anybody say your sister's name? She's, no. Okay. So went back to doing what I was doing. Couple weeks after she passed, some friends that we had in Florida sent me this awesome wind chime. And at the bottom, it's got a little plate that has her name and her dates and in memoriam of. And I purposely hung it in my house in a spot where it didn't get any air vents, it doesn't get any air from doors or windows. You basically got to run around like a flash underneath it to make it chime. And I did that for the reason the day I put it up, I said, hey, if you can hear me, I'm setting this to where most things can't set this thing off. If you wouldn't mind, just let me know occasionally you're here. Ring the wind chime. And it's gone off several times since then, both in my old house and in my new house. So that's, just her kind of reminding me she's here. And then so I retired last June from the military, and I stayed an extra year on base till I found a house. And my mom came to live with me last September, based on some stuff from the pandemic. She kind of lost her job and whatnot. And so she was in the house a couple nights, and I get up to use the restroom and the hall light's on. So I turned it off and did my business, went back to bed. Next morning I said, hey mom, I don't really want to pay a huge electric bill. Can we remember to turn the light off when you get up in the middle of the night? And she goes, I didn't do that. Okay, old lady, I got you. Well, I didn't do it. So just turn the freaking light off, right? Like, I don't want to pay an electric bill. And she's like, okay, yeah, whatever. It kept happening every night, every other night. And I go to her the next morning. Hey, will you please remember to turn the damn light off? And she's like, I'm telling you, dude, I didn't do it. I'm like, okay, you're 78. You just don't want to admit that maybe the memory's slipping. Got it, right? Like, I'm not going to harass you about it anymore, but try and remember. And she's like, I'm telling you, I didn't do this. A couple weeks after that, I'm talking to a friend of mine, which again is one of the few people I think really has psychic abilities. Coincidentally, her name is Dana too. Just talking to her. And she says, hey, Dana's here with me now. I'm like, oh. And she goes, she wanted me to tell you it's her. I said, what's her? And she goes, I don't know, something about a light. And I start laughing. And I said, the hall light? And she goes, yeah. Can you ask her why the hell she's doing that? Because she's raising my electric bill. And she goes, she's just doing it to mess with you and let you know she's there. I go, well, can you tell her to stop? And ever since then, she hadn't done it. So
that's good. I love that, just to have that.
Yeah.
I don't
To know that there's still a person there, right? And you can
Yeah.
still joke with them and converse with them in the manner that you did. It's very comforting. And it makes me feel like, hey, when my time's called, there is something more to this. And maybe that's when I'll figure this all out and still not be able to share it with people on this side.
Yeah.
But
and you're still you. Like it seems like she's carried that personality with
yeah,
her.
exactly. It is totally her. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's definitely really comforting experiences for sure. It's kind of like heartwarming to hear,
Very much so.
I almost hate to change the subject from it.
No,
because
go ahead.
It's so powerful. But you said that you kind of, there's only a couple of people that you believe that are like truly psychic, and so something that I kind of like to do on this show is I like to make even just the smallest correlation to shows that kind of occurred before. It almost becomes episodic, or there's like synchronicity. Everything that we've done here somehow has bled conversationally into the next thing.
Okay.
So we had a psychic on, and her her line of thinking was that everybody has this ability in them. It's just a matter of learning how to harness it. And I know that that is kind of a popular belief, especially to individuals that have schools for it and stuff. So
it's a very new age belief.
I've heard a couple people that I again truly believe have gifts tell me the exact same thing. And the way they put it was, any of us can play basketball, but we all can't be LeBron James, right? Some folks are just, for whatever reason, tuned in to be better at that than everybody else. And so I kind of subscribe to that. That makes sense. Again, can I prove it? No, but what percentage of the human brain if scientists said we don't even use, right? So maybe
mine
they're
probably
able
more
to
than
tap
most
in.
people.
Yeah, I've had 4 concussions playing soccer, so yeah, I'm with you. So maybe those folks can just tap into a little bit bigger percentage of that, or whatever the case may be. But that's kind of how I explain it to folks. I think too, there's a lot of psychics that probably do have abilities, but then again, figure out that there's money to be made from that. And I'm not going to mention names, but you just watch TV and you'll see them.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably plagued worse than ghost hunting.
Yes.
We still have documentaries about Miss Cleo that just came out this year. So yeah, that one's a rough one.
I had a podcast back in 2015 for a couple years, and anytime I'd have a psychic on that I'd never used before, in the pre-show meeting, I'd say, tell me something about me that that you shouldn't know, that isn't on my social media, isn't anywhere you could look up on a computer or read about on me. And if they could do it, then I'd have them on. And if they started with, well, I see that you have a male figure on your father's side that has passed away. No shit, you think? Thanks for your time. We're not going to do the interview. And that's kind of really good. That's how I've approached it. Anytime someone says, oh, I'm a psychic. Okay, well, then tell me something about me that you shouldn't know. And if they can do it, then I feel like they have gifts. If they can't, hey, keep telling people what you want, but you're not selling that order to me. I'm not buying.
Now there is a brand of psychics that claim that they can only look. I forget what they're called, but they can only look into the future. They can't see the present or the past.
And so would those folks be the ones that can't figure out the winning lottery numbers, though?
Yes, or who wins the Super
That's
Bowl.
what I would use that gift for. I mean, who's going to win the Super Bowl? What are the winning lottery numbers? It's I don't know.
You'd think they would be rich by now. They wouldn't have to do the psychic stuff anymore, right?
So I figure, like, and this is being straight up honest. Like, if I truly had that gift, I would use it to win a lot of money, and then I would use that money to help a lot of people, but I'd still live a real comfortable life, right?
Sure.
Like I think most people would, like, even the good-hearted souls would do that. So the fact that they can't, tell me what I'm thinking right now, and they're like, I can't. Like, all right, cool.
Yeah, No, and that's a good approach too, because that tells that tells us that as an investigator, you're not going to you just go in and call every single thing that you see a demonic possession or an infestation or a haunting, or you're just riddled with ghosts, or did you mention Uncle Frank? Uncle Frank might actually be there, and so.
Hey, newsflash for you: Uncle Frank might be an asshole. Yeah, he's not demonic, but maybe he was an asshole in life. And I generally feel like if you're an asshole in life, you're an asshole in death. If you enjoyed needling people or playing really nasty pranks or just getting people spun up, chances are that's probably how you are on the other side.
Well, Drew, I'm sorry.
So that's got to be taken into consideration too. I'm a skeptical believer. I go in skeptically every time, right? Until my analytical brain and my mechanical brain and the evidence leads me to something else. But I always go in, and again, we talked earlier, those old TV shows sensationalize stuff, but I took that tenet from ghost hunters of go in trying to disprove everything, right? And so if I can't disprove it, it means it's paranormal. But that doesn't mean it's haunted, and it doesn't mean there's a ghost there. It means I can't give you a logical explanation for what's there. Now, if I can take my equipment and maybe someone that I believe has psychic gifts, and we can do an investigation and marry their evidence, well, now then maybe you've got a spirit, you've got a haunting. I really have clung to that as one of the tenets of how I approach any investigation, whether it's ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, and it's worked out really well for me in the 15 years I've been doing this.
So that marriage between investigation with equipment and those logistics with a psychic, that seems to be picking up a lot lately. That's something that I see a lot these days that didn't really exist before. So is that something that is trustworthy to just the regular group that you find on Facebook, or is that something that is people should be weary because of how sensationalized it is?
I think you got to try and do your due diligence on whoever says they have gifts, right? There's easy ways to prove it. Tell me something about me that you shouldn't know, right? There's a lot of stuff I don't put on myself. Some people, it may be tougher because they put their entire lives on social media, right? I could go and find out 15 things about them. Sitting behind them at a light with all their bumper stickers and shit on the back of their car, I can tell you 15 things about them, right? So depending on who you are, but the average person doesn't have everything on social media. Use that as your first question. If they can't do it, or they give you some him-haw answer of, oh, well, I can only see the future. Cool. What's tomorrow's winning lottery numbers? Well, it doesn't work like that.
I can't see that far into the future.
But as far as part of your question, is that something new? I've been doing it with my group since 2009. And the way we approach it as a group founder is our psychic goes in after, we'll go in and do a base sweep just to see what's naturally there with the equipment, right? Refrigerators and things that give off high EMF and whatnot. And then the psychic goes in by themselves with a notepad, writes down all of what they get, puts it in a sealed envelope, gives it to me usually. I hang on to it. Then we go in as a team, and he or she now becomes an investigator using equipment, still using their gifts, but using equipment, doesn't tell us what she found out or he found out on that paper. Then we see what the evidence presents. Then we open the letter a week later and say, does that match? A lot of times it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Doesn't mean she's not gifted. It just sometimes the evidence doesn't correlate. But you'd be surprised doing that method how often it does match.
Yeah, and you're dealing with stuff in the afterlife too. So like, can we really say that everything's going to be that accurate? Like we're transcending existence.
Tell me your name. Tom. Okay, what if his name's Brian and he's just messing with you? What if he's a jokester? These idiots think my name is Tom. They've been talking to me for 2 hours as Tom, and my name is Brian.
Yeah, that's something I think I would do in the afterlife.
I probably would as well, right? I'm the guy that
the first thing.
Like my wife would be flipping lights on and ringing doorbells, and yeah, that would be my shtick, I think.
But yeah,
I feel like I'd be Beetlejuice. That would be my thing.
It wasn't even that long ago. People still had to go to the bank every Friday to pick up a paycheck. These satellite signals and stuff that we have. Technology has gone, to space and back, but it hasn't been doing it that long. So, like what you just said, John, with the we're transcending life and afterlife.
This
there's
is all
something,
brand new.
there's something to it.
Well, you got to keep things in perspective, right? So there's this theory, and I don't want to get too political, but like global warming, right? Oh, well, the last 100 years that we've been tracking temperatures, here's what it shows. Okay, but the planet's like 2,000 years old at least, right? And we didn't study any of that before then. So are we cycling or are we just global warming, right? We don't know. So you got to keep everything into perspective of how you're looking at it. And statistics, this is going to come to a shock to some folks, can be used to spin your agenda and your viewpoint any way you want.
Well, acid rain killed me in the 80s before I was even born. And then net neutrality killed me just about 5 years ago. So,
and if you followed Al Gore in the 90s, we all should be underwater right now, right? So,
well, not Al Gore. He was in his jet. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
he was. I mean, he was busy inventing the internet too. So how would he?
Yes, very much so. Thank you for that, Mr. Gore. I appreciate that. But again, I think there's a lot of just common sense things that you can use when you approach an investigation or dealing with psychics or dealing with clients, right? Everybody, again, I said, you're gonna think I'm batshit crazy, is what I get from most clients when they first have contact with them. Guess what? Occasionally, they are. I had one lady, seemed very normal. I went and do a one-on-one interview before we brought the team out. And she says, yeah, I've got these ghosts and stuff. And I said, oh, okay. And she goes, I even have pictures of them on my phone. I said, you have pictures of the ghosts on your phone? She goes, yes. I said, can I see those? Because I'm really interested. And she goes, yep, they're in my purse. And she goes, I'll go get them. So she proceeds to go into her kitchen and gets her purse out of the refrigerator. And I said, hey, just curious, why is your phone in the refrigerator? Oh, so the aliens don't get it. I'm like, oh, you got me, you son of a bitch.
Now hold on.
I'm usually very good at determining if someone's struggling mentally, right?
She might have something there.
She might.
This show is Sasquatchers.
She's 100% wrong. I can't say she's 100% wrong, but I'm going to lean with she might have something she wants to talk to a professional about. And by the way, there were no pictures of ghosts on the phone, even though they was in the fridge. So,
the friendly ghost.
You just kind of you reminded me of something that happened to me. I guess this is probably, I don't know, it's at least 15 years ago, and this is probably the most disheartening thing that's ever happened to me as far as paranormal goes. So we had a really good friend who had this property. It was an old farm. And on that farm, we heard story after story after story after story about how haunted this place was. And they had pictures and more than just photographic evidence, but it was early 2000s. So we didn't quite have the computers in our hand like we do now.
Right.
So we went there one day and they had shown us a picture, and I swear to you, it's as clear as day. The things that you see, there was out of a window. There's I don't know, somewhere. I would date it at about like in 1800s kind of look. There's a monocle and the handlebar mustache, and he's just standing there, plain as day, on the window. And next to him, there's this. You could see this child, and so there's these spirits, and it's just perfect imaging. And we eventually go to this farm, and when we're at this farm, we're playing around. I know certain people have opinions, and I haven't done it since, but we have a Ouija board there. We're trying to communicate with people. We have cameras running. We're taking rooms. We stayed there overnight, but we split up, and my cousin goes up into the attic. A couple of minutes later, he comes down and he said, I see them. And just the way he said it excited me. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You had an experience. We've only been here for like 15 minutes. And he's like, do you want to see them? And I'm like, of course I do. So I follow him up, and we go up there, and he points to the window, and they're right there in the window. And just the way the dust settled on this window, that because we saw this image of this man and this child in it as a spectral, we were able to then discern those same, outlines of dirt
looking out of that window. So
Mm-hmm.
it was the most compelling piece of evidence that I had ever seen at that point. And all it took was walking into that room and looking out of that window to understand that there was nothing there. And
it's very easy to get excited because a lot of times you're sitting in the dark for 4, 6, 8 hours and not getting anything. And then something happens, right? And people are like, do you ever get scared? I'm like, no, I get startled because I'm sitting in the middle of, a room and it's been quiet for 4 hours. And suddenly something goes, I'm going to jump. It's human nature, right? You're not expecting it. So yes, I get startled. Do I get scared? I've not run into anything that I've been fearful of. I had those 2 cases where I'm like, I don't have the skill set to help these folks with it. Again, call it dark, call it demonic, call it evil, whatever. I don't know what it was, but there was just this energy of like, hey, this is not something you should be messing with. So, it's, you have to, I'm my own harshest critic. Like I'll pick my own evidence apart for hours before I'll even show it to a team member. And then I'm like, now you pick it apart, right? Tell me what I'm missing here that's logical that'll explain this. And that's really, I think, the only process you should follow to try and, at the end of the day, whatever you're left with, go, yeah, I feel pretty comfortable in saying this is compelling evidence of the afterlife or of Bigfoot or of, aliens, whatever, discipline of the paranormal you're investigating.
Yeah. And speaking of old ladies putting things into the fridge, my grandmother actually would put her purse in the fridge, but then she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and she died. So.
Well, so we had another case where the lady sounded very, again, very, very competent on the phone with her mental faculties. And we get to the house and the team went with me. A couple members of the team went with me this time. And guys, I shit you not, she had 400 and some odd clocks on the wall. There was 37 of them on the bathroom wall.
Were they all at the same time?
Some of them, like batteries had died, so she just hadn't replaced them.
See, that's that's a Satan thing. If I walked in there and all these clocks were set at the same time, it's like, nope, this is Satan.
And so as I'm interviewing her, right, she had lost her husband about the time I lost my wife, and I said, just kind of again trying to help you out. Hey, have you had any grief counseling for that? Because I know I needed it, right? And she goes, no. I said, you've not talked to anybody about your husband's passing? No. So again, in my head, I'm thinking, well, this might have something to do with it, right? Her mom and dad are there. They're probably in their 60s or 70s. Mom's like, yeah, this place is totally haunted. Dad's sitting in the recliner like this is such bullshit. She's crazy. She's been a nut job since her husband died. But mom's playing into it, right? And so the lady goes, I keep hearing these voices. And I said, oh, okay. And she goes, I even captured them on my phone. I'm like, oh, here we go with the phone again, right? Is it in the fridge? And she's like, no. Sorry. Okay. So she pulls it out of her purse, right? And she opens up the thing. And so I think she's playing me a sound clip that she's done. And she goes, see, it's right here. And then on her phone, you hear, see, it's right here. I said, can I see your phone for a minute? Phone goes, can I see your phone for a minute? She goes, there's another voice. Just give me your phone. So she hands me her phone and I look and it's a camera feed. And I look and it's a camera sitting behind me in her bookcase. And I'm like, the voices you're hearing are coming from that camera. And then on the camera, on a delay, you hear the voices you are hearing are coming from that camera. There it is again. And I'm like, oh shit. And these people, or this lady, had multiple groups out there. Some of them had done Facebook Live investigations and basically just made fun of her. She was paying not one, but 2 psychics from Australia every day, making long distance phone calls to tell her all she wanted to hear about her dead husband. And at the end of the thing, I said, look, we went through this place with our equipment. I don't even think your husband's here right now. But I would like to say, one, I think you need grief counseling, right? Like, I think that's paramount. You really need to talk to somebody about losing your husband because I think it's affecting your kind of whole being right now. And 2, don't bring anybody else in here that's going to take advantage of you, right? Like, our group never charges. We don't even take gas money. But these people were charging her to come into her house to then put her on Facebook Live and basically make fun of her. And I'm like, just stop. Just don't do that. Like, there's nothing here. I'd tell you if something was here. And she's like, oh, okay. So we leave. About 2 weeks later, I network with all the local groups in my area. One of the other founders of another group messages me, hey, do you know this lady in this city? I'm like, uh-huh. Yeah, she just called us. She wants us to come out there this weekend and do an investigation. Just wanted to see what you guys, she mentioned you guys have been out there and wanted to see what you guys found. And I'm like, oh, so, some folks are in it for the thrill. I'm in it to help people, however I can help people. But sometimes folks don't take your suggestions, whatever they are.
Yeah, I felt like through all of the conversations that I've had with investigators, it seems like, more often than not, people want a haunting more so than they actually have one. So
because it's you can brag about, like, oh, my house is haunted. My husband,
to be told
Uncle Frank is coming and screwing around with my shit.
Unlike Hollywood, 99.9% of the time, there's nothing malicious to it. No one's getting hurt. It's noises or things getting moved or you're seeing stuff. But again, this is one good thing about paranormal TV, right? It's made it very acceptable for people to say, I think I got a haunt in my house, or to reach out for help. But the problem is every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a paranormal group now. And sometimes they're not willing. Their agenda is not to help people. They're about, clicks and, YouTube stuff and stuff, monetization and all that stuff that I don't even get into. Our group, we're C1st, clients first. We're there to help. However that is. If that means I got to recommend, hey, I think you may have some mental issues that maybe you need to talk to a professional for. Or I think you got bad wiring, maybe get an electrician out here. Or maybe you got something paranormal. Let's work on getting rid of that if that's what you want the end game to be.
Well, with all of that said, go ahead and promote the name of your group and how people can get in touch with you before we wrap up. I always like to give everybody the opportunities to do that. Plug your stuff.
Sure. Oh, I appreciate it. So we're not super fancy. We do have a website, C1st Paranormal Midwest.com. Same with the Facebook page. Just look up C1st Paranormal Midwest. There's a C1st Paranormal in Florida. That's our brother team. Quick story, and then I know we got to wrap up. We got a call for a lady out here that was having an issue with her daughter. And she had mentioned that she had just recently moved into the area, and they had moved from Florida, and her daughter had been having problems down there, and they called a group down there. And I said, oh, what part of Florida were you guys from? And she says, Tampa. Oh, well, what group by chance in Tampa did you talk to? And she goes, C1st Paranormal? Yeah, that's our brother group. And now you got the Midwest chapter. So we'll see this through to the end. So I was able to call them, get their case notes, see if it matched with what we got. But yeah, so C1st Paranormal Midwest on Facebook, and we have a website. We don't get into like the Instagram and all that stuff, and we don't post our evidence. I just don't believe in it. One, you're going to get ripped apart no matter how good you feel it is, right? And I struggle with people asking me to review their evidence because I wasn't there. I don't know what the dimensions are around that camera, right? What's behind the camera, what you can't see off camera. I could probably pick apart anybody's evidence because I pick apart my own, right? And that doesn't mean it's not legitimate evidence. So we don't charge and we don't post evidence. So if you're needing help and you want to keep it anonymous, we definitely can help you out.
All right. Awesome. There you go. Hey, and any links that you have, send them my way. Every time I throw a description up or anytime I post, I always throw your stuff on with it. So,
okay. Yeah, I'll shoot that to you.
Awesome. So, that was a great episode. I think honestly, the conversation was better than we were going to have.
Better than Magistrate Bill at the Satanic Church.
Well, that's a high bar to live up to. So
in nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.
There's something I didn't fill you in, and I it's almost a gag at this point. We end the show with thanks for squatching.
Or squatch you later.
I like it.
Squatch you later.
And we didn't even get to talk about Sasquatch this time, so maybe I'll come back.
We never talk about Sasquatch. It's in our name.
Yeah, we've had like 15 minutes of Sasquatch conversation. not by design. It's just
we even joked about it on the live stream, and then we didn't talk about Sasquatch for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you should devote a segment to it or something.
No, it's the running gag.
Okay,
At
all
this
right.
point,
Gotcha.
Not
We
on
are-
purpose, but it is
we have
now.
we have a lot of like exciting Sasquatch related things coming up. So
Yeah.
yeah, we are Sasquatchers. Thanks for listening. That was a really compelling episode, and thanks for squatching, everybody.
Squatch you later.